listeners. If you are curious about technical communications, then this podcast is for you. On each episode, I will interview a guest who will share their unique journey. This is Inside TechCom with Zahra Matabana. Let's get started. I recently attended a fascinating webinar titled Beyond the Publication, and I had to have the presenter on my show. I'm honored to welcome my first international guest, Steve Wiseman. Hi, Steve.
Honored to be here. I was touched when you asked. We all were, so we really appreciate it.
What I would like for you to do is tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you kind of became a technical writer, if that's what you started with.
We'll go the opposite way, how I became a technical writer, and then the background, because my technical writer is quite simple. I'd finished a degree in England where I was born, close to Liverpool, kind of, where I studied. And then I came to Israel. I studied business information technology. So it's kind of what we are, the connection between business and tech, where we were and where we still are, very much so. Mm-hmm. And the first job offer I got was being a technical writer. Now, what's funny is I don't think I can write very well. I can write better now than I did then. But when I got that job at 23, I wasn't a very good writer. I really wasn't. But that also taught me something about technical writing, that if you're a marketing writer or a copywriter, then you really do need to have fantastic English. But when you're a technical writer, the objective is more, can you get the technical information or the procedural information over in a way that the reader is able to read it? And that's the main thing. I'll give you an example. I don't know if I can mention the company. I was speaking to a friend of mine who works for one of the main enterprise companies in the world. We're talking about this, really more the idea of curating content rather than just writing it. Mm-hmm. But she said the way of the world, and this is interesting if it's happening to a lot of other companies, that this company actually lost intentionally a lot of their writers. They have a lot of their product managers or similar SMEs writing the content, then gets passed to some sort of writing process as an editor or whatever, but they're not doing the same amount of work that we used to do as technical writers. And they push it out. So the quality of the content, maybe before it was 90%, maybe now it's 70, 80%. It's less so. But the point is, can they get the information out accurately and quickly? And that seems to be a change a bit in the market, which technical writers need to understand in order to keep their work and keep adding value. The companies are looking less at the quality of the language. Just, is it enough to get the message okay? And that's basically what I was when I started as a technical writer. I wasn't brilliant at writing, but I was good enough to get the message over and manage the process. So that's how I got into technical writing. First job in a new country, and I took it.
Well, what took you to Israel?
Honestly, being Jewish.
Okay.
It's a Jewish country, and my grandfather lived here. I used to hate the place. I remember when I came when I was 9 years old, in the place called Caesarea where I used to live, which is a kind of a place where the Prime Minister lives. It's a very nice place, all rich houses. Unfortunately, he had a small flat. If we had a big house, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be very wealthy, but unfortunately, a small flat. I hated it. It was boring. There was nothing to do. And my friends wouldn't have believed that I came to live here. And then come 18, 19 years old, I happened to come 3 times a year to visit him. I fell in love with the country, fell in love with what it's about, the whole history and everything related to it. And I said, I'm going to give it a go before I get married. No responsibilities, nothing to lose, which is always the best way to do something.
Absolutely.
And I came, got a job, friends, life, worked out very well.
That's great. So you've been there for a long time.
Yeah, 28 years.
Awesome. I would love to visit Israel someday. I've heard such fascinating stories about it from my husband who has visited. So someday we shall meet.
Well, on behalf of the whole country, we all welcome you.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to meet you first then. I would love to. You made some interesting comments about technical writing. You don't need to be a great writer. You just need to be able to communicate. And then you also kind of commented about how companies are starting to, quote unquote, compromise on the quality. If it was 90%, it is 70%, and it is good enough. Would you say that this is, now you're my first international guest that I'm talking to, and I have been a technical writer only in the United States, and quality is something that I focus on. extremely important to me. Now, is this a trend that you're probably seeing in other countries, or is this across the board now that you've been in the industry?
So first of all, when I speak, I'm not talking about Israel. Israel is especially with what I'm doing with Peligo, I'm completely international as far as I'm concerned with the people I speak to. Mm-hmm. Okay, so my opinions are coming from speaking to companies all over the world. I don't know if I could pick up from other companies the same message exactly that I got from my friend of mine, but also she would tell me things that, if I'm speaking to a prospect or a customer, they probably wouldn't tell me. She's a friend, so she tells me the inside, dealings of what's going on that I wouldn't necessarily hear. But I'll tell you one thing that certainly has changed, and I think it is part of it, and it's probably right what she says, is that when I started, collaboration was printing something out, giving a whole book to 2 or 3 people and getting some reviews and pasting them back into Word or FrameMaker, and that was it. The whole world has changed with collaboration, right? Nowadays, the days of sitting for 2 hours with an SME kind of gone. You send them some sort of assignment to give you information, and then you bring it back into the system, right? Edit it, do your magic, and then send it out to review. So it's not so far anyway from what I'm describing. That's how most people work. We don't write the content anymore, often from scratch.
Of course.
We're often accessing what other people have written and then putting it together. So it is that type of workflow, even if it's not quite as extreme as the example I gave. Mm-hmm. I think most people are working in that direction. It's like, I love the word curating content, because that's what a lot of the time we're doing. Getting back to what we said originally, you're less writing from scratch. You're putting it together. You're making it coherent, right? You're making it organized. You're adding the missing information that other people didn't put in that you realize your users need to know.
Agreed. Absolutely. I think curating content is a good way to describe what we are doing, because remember, we are creative plagiarists, right? Mm-hmm. We take the content somebody else has created, and then we put our magic touch to it. But that magic touch is where our skill, I suppose, comes in. And since the goal of my podcast is to cater to listeners who may be trying to get into this field or who are career changers, I want to give them a sense of what technical communications is. And I do want them to, I guess, recognize that even though the quality of your writing, I think that's a debatable, right? It's moot. It's debatable what we are talking about, whether companies want it 70% or 90%. You do need to have writing skills. Even if you're going to take content curated, you need to bring a special skill set to that. In your opinion, when we say that you don't need to be a good writer, are we trivializing the profession of technical communications?
Okay. It's good you brought that up, because if you didn't, you're right, they'd get the wrong message.
Right.
So very, very good in class. In that webinar that you heard, I actually used an expression, the science of technical writing, right?
Yes.
Which is probably an answer to your question. We were specifically talking and a little bit being humorous about the idea of writing.
Exactly.
But there's much more to it.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
But I would actually use it. It's not all about writing. The amount of time that someone spends writing is probably not as much time as they spend doing everything else. The management, the organization, working out how to put things together, strategy, structure, architecture, the review process, and everything, the versioning, everything that goes with it. There's no question about it. Technical writing is a skill. And in that webinar, my whole argument was that the content is the driver for a whole company, every single department, human resources, legal, development, support. Content is the driver. But most people don't recognize there's a science to how things work properly. Processes, workflows, they need to be the importance of recognizing its effect. And most companies don't do that. The technical writer today, I think, needs to recognize that, have those skills where writing is only a part of it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in my demos, I kind of say we're project managers. And that's in a lot of cases what a technical writer does, because they have to manage all the different departments who are providing or having some say in the content curation process. And you have to manage that. And it's human management. What happens when you've got this developer who really is a bit narky? He or she, okay, no, he's being narky, so we'll call him a he. He's being, I can get away with it in this time, right? If I'm nice, I've got to say he or she. If it's being narky, I'm going to he.
Let's say it's a he, because generally it is a he.
So you have to know to deal with that. what you're going to do. So no, there's a content creation maybe is less than it was 20 years ago. But the management of the whole process and everything that surrounds it that I just described, that is much more than it used to be. So I'm very glad you brought up that question, because otherwise it would have come out with absolutely the wrong impression.
Absolutely. And I mean, I see the distinction. I just wanted to kind of dig into it a little more so that you could clarify what you meant by it. And thank you for kind of placing it in a context. It was not to trivialize. And yes, I've been a technical writer for a while, and I have seen how content curation is just a very small aspect. That curation is a process in itself, the science of technical writing. If I may say so, the webinar that I attended of yours, my takeaway was how the tech pubs or technical communications or documentation, whatever your company calls your department, is looked at as a cost center. And the tips that you gave in your webinar started making me think how we can become profit centers. Or
a beacon for the company.
A beacon for the company. Yes. And I mean, those were some of the takeaways that I had from your webinar. And it just placed technical communications in a very interesting context to me from a business perspective. How do you come at it from the business side?
Well, I love it because, see, when I started, content was, I've got to write a manual. I've got putting a product out. I've got no choice. Got to write the documentation. Will anybody read it? I don't know. Is it in the right format for them? Is it accessible? I don't know. Do I care? No. It wasn't even in the road. I remember most companies that I worked for originally, it wasn't even on the roadmap. Writing and translation were these afterthoughts all the time. But now, if you look at it in the right way, people have begun to appreciate the business value of content. They realize its importance, but not just from a marketing perspective. Obviously, someone's writing a website, putting a brochure, it's obvious to everybody. That content is what will bring or help bring or not help bring in your sales, right? That everybody understands. But people now appreciate a couple of things. One, in technical content itself, how important it is with the process, onboarding, support. You can improve your pre-sales by excellent technical content. That someone say you've got a product that integrates with Salesforce and they're looking for, I don't know, ABC type of technology with Salesforce, and your product happens to go in there, one of the support questions, you might bring in a lead. I actually sometimes encourage customers to maybe put even some sort of demo link on their help page, maybe the header or the footer. So if someone comes there, then you can potentially generate business. As a technical writer, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. Because if you can get statistics and actual say, okay, over the last month, we've had 15 new leads because they came via the technical content. You have become much more than a cost center in your language. You've again become a beacon to the company by doing such a thing. There's little things like that help. So, but that's on the technical content side. What I was talking about a lot in that webinar was people just don't see everywhere in the company, they don't see the value of content. They don't see the value of reusing content. For example, you as a tech writer, you wrote a beautiful introduction. You explained the product in a simple way, but nobody else has the access to use that same content. When sales are putting an RFP or a proposal together, they should be reusing that same content. Other places should. Or QA should be using your same procedural documentation for creating their test documents. What I found, you know what DAMs are, where they're systems where, I think it's digital asset management, where there's a lot of systems out there where a single source of delivery content. So like on SharePoint, you'll put all your PDFs or all your whatever it is, people to access. But where do companies have a single source of source content for people to share? They don't. And from a business perspective, the CEO should be saying everybody in the company should be reusing the same content as much as possible. Don't try and reinvent it, because if we all reinvent the same type of content, we invariably get it wrong. Don't put it in the same way. All the time that somebody invested into writing that content in the first place, it's all wasted because it was used once and never again.
Right.
People understand the business benefit of using and reusing content of the whole company. It saves time. It saves money, and the continual messaging, the subtle ways you drive things into people's minds. You can do that, and And the skills of a technical writer allow companies to do it, because they wouldn't do it without the skills of us. We talk about the science, I kind of repeated a bit of conference, the webinar, sorry, but the skills that we have, if you can teach it around the company, everybody benefits and you become the beacon again.
Now, couple of things. One is you talked about how technical content can contribute to business value. But as a technical writer, I have attended your webinar, but for the sake of our listeners, can you summarize, what skills? Sometimes it's very hard. Technical writers, and I don't want to stereotype technical writers, but I'm putting myself out there. I'm introverted. I tend to not see the business value that my content can bring. What would you tell writers? What should we work on? What skills should we work on? Or how do we go about it to show the value in our content?
So the first thing is to recognize when you've got a skill. Let's say, for example, you started playing piano or the guitar, or you play tennis like I do, whatever I do, right? And you think, I'm not very good. Right, I keep losing to the person I'm playing against, right? But you can play a forehand and a backhand and volley, but you're not great. And then you go and play against someone who's never hit a tennis ball before. You realize you know what you're doing. It's just compared to someone else, you've put yourself in a negative place, less self-confidence about this particular issue. But generally, people don't recognize the immense skills they have in probably nearly everything they do. Right, that's just a general thing in life. People should realize that everybody is amazing. They really are. Everybody can do things that have a skill set. Everything in life. Nobody should undervalue themselves in any way whatsoever in any form of life.
I think that's a great message. Absolutely. I think the second part of my question is, let's say I recognize my skill set. I'm confident. But then how do I articulate? We are great at curating content that somebody gives us, but then we also have to sell that curated content as having business value.
So the first thing we need to do is recognize what our skills are. And we mentioned them before. We're managers. We know how to get the most out of content. We know how to reuse content. We know how to work inside processes. We know how to interact with other people. We know how to motivate sometimes other people to provide us content, because if we don't get that content, we can't finish our work. We have a huge amount of skills. That's the first thing to recognize, as you said. My example was you don't know what you've got, but you really have it. So once you recognize that, and you suddenly look in the wider company and recognize the same pain points, like our pain points 20 years ago, no reusable content, no proper workflows, translation was a huge mess. And I've suffered from manual translation processes, and they're an absolute nightmare. I won't mention products. But when you suddenly see, wait a second, everybody else in the company has the same problems as we had before we started using great products, right?
Right.
So as soon as you come to that realization, one of the things I've found in life, you asked a big question, how can we help the big business? That's a big question. It's a very hard question to jump from A to Z. You have to do things in stages. We realize, A, we got skills. B, we look around the company and we see everybody suffered from where I've suffered as well. Maybe not the same company in the past from experience, or other people in our creative plagiarist industry that we have. If anyone's joining late, we mean technical writers. I think you have to rewind back to see where that expression came from.
Right.
Once you do it in stages and you suddenly realize, okay, I realize everyone else has the same problem as me, then it's not so hard to go, cool. If you need to speak to somebody, it's always helpful when you've got something in common. And now you recognize you've got something in common. It's not such a hard job. Now to get, I see there's a problem with this. Maybe I can help you because we've done this before. And so we mentioned the business benefits before, Joanne. We basically want to reuse content, make it more efficient, make the messaging clear to a company, reduce wasted costs.
I think that's a good point.
We've been there before, and we'll now help you to do it. It's not such a big jump when you take it in stages. Maybe, as we discussed in the webinar, how to go about it, et cetera, et cetera. But conceptually, when we were discussing it, the person, Andy Francis, who basically, she gets just as much, if not more, of the kudos for this, because she put a lot of it together. I'm just the voice side of it. She was telling me, don't make the writer sound like they can be a big star. Not everybody wants to be a crystal. And I'm like, give the writer strength, right? It'll make them a big star in the company. They'll be amazing. They'll be so. No, not everyone's like that. Not everyone's like me, right? As you say, you're more introverted. Obviously, you're not that introverted because you're running a podcast, right? So
right.
But there are ways to do it. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Is this podcast just a natural next step for you? Or is it something you're really challenging yourself to make yourself do it?
Happy to answer that. I think it is really to challenge myself. So I'm really stepping outside my comfort zone here.
That's what I thought from what you were saying. I think that's tremendously impressive. And it also makes it genuine. You know, you're not, some people can do this kind of thing for the stardom, for name. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it to challenge yourself to become a better person and to get more skills. And I think that's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And I appreciate the support that I'm getting.
100%. You know, I think I'm kind of scared for all the courses that people are doing. People are running because you can now get so much information without doing courses, not in a systematic way, but it's also more real and it's in smaller chunks. So I'm trying to get into the property ladder a little bit, and you don't need to take a course. You just need to speak to mortgage brokers and agents, and you pick it up on the way.
Again, my husband was a CTO of a company, of a startup. Now he's completely jumped ship. He's into real estate. And everything that you just said, right, where you learn on the go, hands-on, that's exactly what he's done to be where he is. That has motivated me. I'm like, why am I so scared? I need to learn from him. Just go with the flow.
But you know what this is a really good example of? Because really what you're dealing with is still content. It's verbal content right now, but it's content. It's just an example of another skill of the science of technical writing that I don't think regular technical writer needs to learn it, but it's an example of managing content in a different way, being creative, accessing, and you'll just become better as a person, in the job that you do, and you never know which direction you'll take after something like this, which is very exciting. But it's still content management. Everything walks around, every podcast, every customer or internal interaction. It's all part of the story that we're talking about.
Everything that you just said is so fascinating to me because content is not just the written word. Content is being created around you all the time. Mm-hmm. And this is one aspect of how you can create content and how you can curate it. So thank you for actually throwing light on that, what content looks like. Content is not just the written word.
We can get it wrong sometimes, because I remember a few years ago, there's a technical writing conference in Israel. And a couple of people got up when YouTube just came out and they said, video is the future of technical writing. There'll be no more written word. Everything will be done by videos. And I was thinking, all right, here we are. Here's another person jumping on the bandwagon of the latest technology without having a clue of where it fits in. And a lot of people do that. And I was proven right. Videos are an excellent source of content, but everything else has its time and place, right? You have to know. I often use this expression, content roadmap. When you're bringing content out, say for a new product, you have to work out what type of content am I using in different places. You might have something like WalkMe for the onboarding. You might have a help center. You might have some videos, tutorials, learning management system. A podcast can also be a big part of it, or these kind of recorded videos, right? Because people will learn from these types of things as well. So all of the different types of content delivery help part the picture, but not one of them is going to take over the whole game. I think written word is always going to have a huge part because it's just more efficient when you know the product to read words than it is to listen to a half an hour speech. I'll give you an example where it's not the case. Let's say you're creating an API guide. Imagine doing that all in video. Yeah,
very good example there. You would not want to see that in video.
That's right.
Very
that's
true.
Right.
Yeah, very
that's
true.
Right.
Good points there, Steve. This is a great conversation going on. But in the interest of time, I want to go back to your background because what you told us was how you started off as a technical writer. But you've also been an entrepreneur. And to me, that is something that I would love to do, but I don't know how to go about it. And I'm so scared. So please share your journey with us.
So I'll send you the contract to be a partner after this podcast.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to.
No, I mean, again, everything's been natural for me in my life, including coming to Israel. It was just a natural step that I took. It wasn't a big deal. I worked in quite a big company for a couple of years as a writer. and I made contacts. And I was getting bored just doing the writing, because you can see my character's a bit, I want to do all sorts of other things. Right. So I became independent. And for becoming independent, got a few more customers, so I became a company. Okay, I can't handle all those companies, so I'll bring a couple of people in. I've never been a big company. I'm a small company. And now, 95% of my, maybe that's too much, 90% of my time, I'm the product evangelist for Poligo, because my business skills, they work together, because it's a fantastic technical writing product. And I'm also got the business side to sell and be involved in that side. That's why I came into it. But I've been through it all. I've sold to large companies like Microsoft and Intel, those types of services, technical writing services down the line. That helps with them being in Israel, because it made it easier. Now I'm more international, but then I was very much localized. I've sold Zendesk, so I know customer experience. I know customer support, which is the thing if you want to talk about, I think is huge. The people have to realize that content is the customer journey and the content journey basically are parallel. They work, most of it is about content, a lot of that journey, which a lot of people don't realize. The integration with support, right? That's huge. I often say support, training, and tech docs are brothers and sisters or twins, whatever, or triplets, whatever you want to call them, because they really are doing all the same things. And I find it quite astonishing that they're not so closely integrated. And the product that in Pliego that they kind of are, but in the market, people do not see them together. If you ask tech docs, they don't necessarily, they're long lost siblings, right, are training and support. They don't see it that way, but they are. It's all the same content. And that's what I've learned through what I've been doing. The market's following kind of my journey, because people do realize this. I'm not saying stuff that no one's thought about before, but there are a lot of people who don't think about it. That's my journey to where I am now.
Okay. I mean, what you said was that this has been a natural journey for you, but how did a business idea come to your mind? How did you know that this is the business that I want to do? Did you recognize a need? Did you see a need that you were trying to fulfill?
I'd love to say that, Zoe, but I'm not like that. I think things through, but I do follow, like, technical writing is my base knowledge. That's what I know. So it makes sense to build a business around that knowledge. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't have these big, massive, beautiful visions. Right? It's not the way that I work. Maybe if I did, I'd be a multimillionaire by now. I follow what seems to be the right path at the right time. And using my knowledge, but in a business capacity, to build a small business, that made sense to me.
Okay.
And being able to resell a product like Zendesk when that idea came along, I thought was phenomenal, because that just took me into a different type of industry. Mm-hmm. Where they didn't fully understand content. That product, they have a help center, but they don't really understand content. That's where I saw an opportunity in there to go to. I even spoke at the Zendesk Relate conferences, explaining them how to write content in their help centers. Again, more of a natural progressions.
Got it. I think the way I'm processing this information is life has presented me with opportunities too, but it's you have responded to that opportunity and I haven't. And I think the takeaway for me personally is maybe, when opportunity comes knocking, and if your heart is in it even a little bit, you want to respond to it. And it may take you some places that you wouldn't have been. And that's my takeaway, honestly. I don't know how our listeners would respond to this, but I think I'm just trying to put a little context around that, some messaging around that is, as a writer, sometimes we are very siloed, we are very internal looking, and it is important for us to respond to opportunities, whether be it in your company or be opportunities for entrepreneurial opportunities, to kind of respond to that and to follow your gut sometimes.
So first of all, I don't think you're not a risk taker, because you're doing this, as we've said. So I think you've got more entrepreneurial bones than you think you have.
Probably. As I mentioned, this was really to push myself. And thank you for appreciating that. I'm definitely taking more risks as the grays appear.
Yeah. I know the appearing. But I think someone who's a huge risk taker would have taken much more risk than I have. It's going with your gut, but you can't just go with your gut, because if you go with your gut, you might get it wrong. I ever believe that. Everything has to be thought through carefully. Okay. But what you can often have are opportunities that aren't a huge amount of risk. Like, I've built a business where I basically pay people by the hour. I haven't had to take a loan of $1 million to get a business going. So maybe if I did, the company would be 300 people by now. I don't want to do something like that. My family life doesn't work around that way. We don't take a certain amount of risk, but not too much.
Got it.
Opportunities come, like selling Zendesk, there was no risk. It's only risk of my time, nothing else, right? Sometimes you get opportunities that you can take without a huge risk. And as you say, you don't know where it'll take you. But to think them through, not be too scared. Like when we spoke about the podcast at the beginning, about I'm not really fearful about doing this type of thing. I'm not bothered if it goes wrong. Because it's all, I gave you something as well before, but what I always think about life is what is the worst thing that can happen if something goes wrong? Your family will stay fine. Like, let's say I mess up in this today. The family will still be fine. They'll still be healthy, right? Nothing really bad will happen apart. Steve will be embarrassed. Well, Steve doesn't actually really care about that. Maybe other people do a bit more, but I really don't care. I've been embarrassed so many times. I say so many stupid. When you speak as much as I do, you know you put your foot in your mouth. It's like it's half expected.
I like that. I mean, you're really comfortable. I think you've kind of just going with the flow. And this is allowing me to do that. It's okay to put your foot in your mouth and you still get on with life because life, it's, as you said, it's not going to impact your family life. And people might laugh about it for a second or two. But your learning out of it is, to me, the learning that I'm getting out of this is more important than anything else. I'm not going to look at it as failure, is what I'm trying to say.
That's right. So, everything's an experience and it makes you better.
It makes you better, exactly. I want to come back to the triplet analogy that you gave, because I'm originally from India. And to me, Bollywood movies, if you've heard about them.
I've never seen one, but yes, I've heard of them.
Yeah. And some of these, I mean, they're insufferable and I wouldn't recommend. These are some of the movies from even before I was born. But the storyline would be, there would be 2 or 3 brothers and they were lost. And then they discover each other many, many years later. To me, when you were giving this analogy of the twins or the triplets, that theme was running through my mind. But from a content perspective, I definitely want you to touch upon that. What is it that you wanted to share?
Well, basically, if you think of the content, all of them are dealing with answering customers' questions and helping them on board the product. The tech docs are writing the procedural content, let's say. Maybe there's more to it than that, but let's just, for the sake of argument, it's more procedural content.
Mm-hmm.
The trainers are going to use that same content, but maybe in a slightly different way. They'll put it maybe in presentations. They'll put it in tutorials. They'll be putting a slide deck together and speaking it over with workshops and putting workbooks together. But it's the same general content. How do I use the product? That's what training is, the same as tech docs.
Tech docs, yeah.
Tech docs. Maybe tech docs could be some sort of interesting phrase. And support is just part of that same journey. It's often less of how can I start using the product, because that's more training. Mm-hmm. But support is, okay, how do I continue using the product? And that is the same stuff, again, you're right, as a tech writer, because we're covering both, we're covering the source or getting somebody into the product, the onboarding process, but we're also dealing with when they're using it, helping them find content, to answer their specific question. That's what support is. It's the same thing.
Right.
I mean, part of a workflow should be, okay, when there's task-oriented content, which is the easier to write, and there's also content that we should be writing in relation to what support agents get, the tickets that company get. There should always be a workflow, which there often isn't in a company.
Right.
That an agent gets a ticket. It could be something very specific, do we support Microsoft? Or what version of Microsoft we support? And the question keeps coming up, and it's not in your tech docs. So it's something to suddenly, it's a ticket that comes up. It's a thing we haven't covered because we can't cover everything. You can cover the general ideas, but all the specifics you cannot cover when you're writing documentation. But if you have a workflow to get content from support, bring it back into tech docs. And again, the 70-90% of quality rule is relevant here as well. Just get it out quickly. The sooner I get it out, the less ticket. For those of you who know, there's a term called ticket deflection. It means putting content there to deflect the ticket rather than somebody sending a ticket into an agent, because it's much cheaper to provide content than it is for a human being to go and have to answer, investigate, and whatever with the question. It can take some time. So once you've learned that, have it noted, have a workflow, get it to the content curators, get it out as quick as you can onto your help portal, your knowledge base, or whatever you call it. And then the next person who asks that same question will get an answer to it. But so it's all related. So training is more pre, support is more, a bit often, maybe at the beginning, but often a bit more advanced. And Tech Docs covers both of those scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I see they're very much as triplets.
And as you were sharing the commonalities across these departments, it became clear to me that what I should be doing in my role to look at the workflow, kind of take a step back. We are so in the weeds. What's that saying? You're losing the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. And that's the view that you're trying to kind of bring to our attention, that you need to take a step back and look at how content flows and how you can respond to both training and support.
Can I give you another example? Can I give
Absolutely,
you an example
please.
The forest and the trees, and I had this literally with a company last week. So part of Poligo is if I'm allowed to say it,
sure.
It's a structured authoring product, and it's based on DocBook rather than DITA. And I often get these questions, go, why DocBook? DITA's more famous. And that people can have all these specific questions about DITA. And I say, just wait a second, okay? Let's move away from the discussion of which one's better, right? There's no lollipop surprise for someone who wins the argument, or DITA's going to suddenly go and get an Emmy or something. It's not going to happen. It doesn't really matter which XML it is or how it's done or how you do a variable. What matters is can I author in an efficient way? Can I collaborate in an efficient way? Can I distribute my content in an efficient way or an effective way for the users? They should be the questions, but often tech writers who've been in the market for a long time, a long history of these issues, we can't forget it. We completely see this wood of so much, but don't really pick out what's important. What's important is usability and effectiveness for the customer. Not, is it this or is it this, and can it do this and is it that? Oh no, but you can't press the yellow button with green dots on. Oh, I'm not having a product I can't do that for. That's not the point. And I had this discussion with a company on late Thursday night, my time, and I had to say it to them. Would you please think about the usability for yourselves and for the customers? Does the product is it answering your pain points? Is it going to give you something you haven't got already? Are you going to save money and time by doing things more efficiently? They're the questions you need to ask.
I tend to sometimes get lost in the details. You as a writer are not looking at it holistically. And that is what I'm trying to remind myself, that it's right. At the end of the day, you want to communicate efficiently and effectively to the audience. And the touch points are all these different departments, and you need to be interacting with these departments to make your content better. And you could save so much of your work probably if you just coordinated and worked in tandem rather than in a siloed manner.
100%. And to get others to agree to that or to be part of it, is they have to see tangible benefits. They have to understand what you're going to provide to them, which we've discussed a little bit already. But when you can show you're going to become more efficient, you're going to save time, you're going to be able to produce better documents, your process is going to be more efficient, they'll listen to you. If you say to someone, I've got this great product, it's got technical, technical writer could do this, and I've seen them do this. They go to the CEO, but you haven't used variables. Yeah, variables are great, and conditional text is going to make the company fly. The CEO will close the door on them as quick as they possibly can. But if the person goes and says, we can actually save the company money, probably potentially increase sales, increase reusable content, have the same messaging. Now the CEO's ear opens and he listens to you.
Because every information that you have shared or that we've talked about has been absolutely relevant. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
We've had a conversation, so I respond to conversation. So, and the way to make me quiet is to ask me a completely general question, anything I want to add.
And that's exactly what I did.
So I don't have anything to add apart from me saying, you said you are honored. It's ridiculous. I'm honored. I mean, I don't normally do this kind of stuff. To be asked to go on such an international podcast, which I'm sure is going to be really popular when it comes out, we're honored. I've just sat down for an hour and chatted with you. I've not done anything else but chat with you, and I loved it.
I thought I was talking to a friend. That I'm meeting after a long, long time. So this was a great conversation, Steve. Thank you so much for your time. And I have learned so much personally. And
My pleasure.
And I look forward to signing that contract with you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share on your social media to help me reach a wider audience. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, including Apple, Google, or Spotify. Follow us on Twitter @InsideTechCom or visit us at www.insidetechcom.com. www.insidetechcom.show for the latest updates. Catch you on another episode.